like to call to order the regularly scheduled board meeting of the Parish Union School District number 95 Board of Education for Monday, October the 6th. Let the record show that all members are present except for members Calvin and Sanchez. The voting sequence for this meeting is as follows: Idle, Isaac, Tuttle, Bailey, and Davis. Audience and visitors. All of the audience like to address the board. I do want to introduce someone that came with me tonight. I have Jennifer Garrison, who's CPA at our office, and she's with the Chamber Area Leaders, and she's here to watch our meeting tonight. Glad to have you. Consent agenda. In your packet, we have the minutes from the September 4th meeting, a list of bills, and the August treasurer's report. Does anyone have any questions on the consent agenda? If not, I entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Idle?
Yes.
Yes.
Tuttle?
Yes.
Bailey? Davis is yes. Secretary's report? Superintendent's agenda?
Okay, I'm going to, well, we do have a quorum, but I think I'm still going to, one of our board members may need to leave a little early, so I think I'll go down the other items that take a vote, and then go back to our audit and our ISAP presentation, if that's okay with you. First, then on my agenda, I have a retirement request. You have a letter from Peg Dixon, music teacher at Wentz School. Received her letter that she intends to retire at the end of this school year, actually. She is asking for the retirement incentive, but it will just be for this year. So at this time, I would ask that the board approve the retirement request of Peg Dixon at the end of the 14-15 school year.
Can I ask a question? Is that 6% retroactive to the beginning?
It will be, yes. We just didn't get it in the September meeting, so.
So moved.
Any discussion? If not, Idle?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Tuttle?
Yes.
Bailey? Davis is yes.
Okay, you have a recommendation from Mr. Don in your packet to fill the music position at Memorial School that was left vacant by Charity Ozer. Gary's recommending the employment of Jonathan Boren to fill this position. As you know, Jonathan is currently serving as a Title I paraprofessional at Wentz School. At this time, I would ask the board approve the employment of Jonathan Boren to fill the music position at Memorial School.
So moved.
Any discussion? If not, Idle?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Tuttle?
Yes.
Bailey? Yes. Davis is yes.
Okay, we have a Title I paraprofessional position and a student aide. If you don't have a problem with it, I'll just combine the two for one vote. Mrs. Perry's recommending to employ Ellen Andrews to fill the Title I vacancy. That vacancy is left by Jonathan Warren, who is now our new music teacher at Memorial School. And Mr. Don is recommending the employment of Ashlyn Hayes to serve as a one-on-one student aide at Memorial School. She's worked as a sub with that student, and it's working out well for both of them, so it's giving them a little time together to see how they would work. So at this time, I would ask the board approve the employment of Ellen Andrews as a Title I paraprofessional at Wentz, and Ashlyn, Hayes for these one-on-one student aide at Memorial.
So moved.
Do you have a second? Okay. Any discussion? If not, Idle?
Yes.
Isaac? Tuttle?
Yes.
Bailey? Davis is yes.
Okay. You have included in your packet some information from the Edgar County Fair Board to Mr. Roberts and Nick's here this evening, our athletic director of Mayo. They're allowing us to use their track at the fairgrounds cross-country program, and they, I think, Nick, you're pretty excited that it's
Yeah,
all
it's actually the whole fairground we use it for
Okay.
it. So we're just gonna make a course out there where we have all needs out there.
Okay. At the County Fairgrounds. So we went through there and Nick worked out an agreement. So at this time, I thought I would just still ask for the board to approve that so that you are aware, our students are utilizing the fairgrounds for cross-country. So I ask the board to approve the use of the Edgar County Fairgrounds by Mayo cross-country program.
So moved.
Any discussion? If not, Ida?
Yes.
Isaac? Tuttle?
Yes.
Bailey? Davis is yes.
Okay, we have a couple of facility requests, and I'll combine those as well. The first one's from our Paris Junior League, and once again, Toby Wilson was asked to use the district facilities for the Junior League. There was a copy of their practice and game schedule for each building. He's worked with the administration to make sure that this doesn't conflict with anything else going on at the school. They have proof of insurance through Diamond Brothers, and I'm going to ask that the board approve that. But next, the First Farmers Bank is once again asking for the use of the Joe Whitaker Gym on Friday, October 31st for their annual Halloween parade. So I would ask that the board approve the Junior League using the district facilities, waiving any fees attached, as well as First Farmers Bank using it for October 31st and Mother Gymnasium.
So moved.
Any discussion? If not, Ida?
Yes.
Isaac? Tuttle?
Yes.
Bailey? Davis is yes.
Okay, we have two fundraiser requests, one for Memorial PFO, and they are asking to use Memorial again in December, the 5th and the 6th, to hold their annual holiday bazaar. The funds would be used towards student activities throughout the school year. They've done this for several years. It's been pretty successful, I think. And Creative Center has sent in a permission to hold their annual fundraiser October 2nd through the 14th, and I believe they're selling candles, and they use that for the school program. So I would ask the board to approve the Memorial PFO, the Creative Center's fundraiser request.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, Ida?
Yes.
Isaac? Tuttle?
Yes.
Bailey? Davis is yes.
Okay, and there's just some other information. Mayo Middle School, along with Crawford High School, is hosting a murder mystery on October 18th. I just wanted to point that out. And there's a flyer in your packet for that. It will be at Mayo School. I believe that comes down to the audit report. And we have Kemper CPA here, Brian Bradley from Kemper CPA with our yearly audit. And we're on time. We don't have to file an extension. And so he's here to present the audit.
Well, thank you all for having me. It's a nice library. The audit is finished, and you have the final reports down there in front of you. No major issues this year. I thought I'd do the presentation a little differently. If you want to turn to the very back, there's some loose letters back there. And since that one-page summary is the information that people find the most interesting, I thought I'd start with that tonight. And that's kind of the rundown of some of the key elements in the reports, like your financial profile scores, the first thing. You can see that's unchanged from prior year, 3.35. That's that calculation state does to kind of monitor school districts. Your long-term debt margin has increased a little bit over last year, and I found it interesting that it didn't increase as much as your debt payments. And so I was thinking through your assessed valuation, which is at the bottom of the sheet, actually went down this year. So, I'm not familiar with what that might be, but it was a $1.2 million decline in the assessed valuation. So that does affect your legal debt margin that how much you can borrow. Your average daily attendance went from 1320 to 1359. That's a pretty good increase in 1 year. So that brings you to your estimated operating expenses per pupil. For this year was $6,198, and last year was $6,353. So it was a decline of 155, and some of that has to do with the increase in the average daily attendance. And then your estimated per capita tuition charge actually went down some this year to $4,963 from $5,256. And the main difference between that and your operating expenses is the federal monies you receive and some depreciation charges that you're allowed to claim on that per capita tuition. So the next section is your cash and investment balances. You can all read those yourself. I don't have to read them to you. The final section there is the change in fund balance, and this is basically the net income, so to speak. for each fund for the year. And two of them I thought I'd point out was the education fund. It did end the year at a deficit of $476,000. But if you look at the year before, it was over 1.2 million the year before, so a dramatic improvement, even though it was still a deficit for the year. The capital projects fund, which isn't really unusual, it's just a big change from the prior year. You know, there was a little bit of money made there because most of the money gets spent on the other fund. So it went from a large loss last year to about breaking. So that's the highlights of the financials. You know, nothing else that never really stood out to me. Worth pointing out to you. It's all historical information for the most part. The second thing you have there is a management letter. It's on our letterhead. It's a letter from us to the management board to kind of point out things that we think could be areas of improvement. So we had a couple of comments this year. And these aren't major items. These aren't audit findings. These are just suggestions. One thing we noticed was a fuel charge allocation this year. We kind of noticed something there, and it's not big dollars involved, but we noticed that when the high school's budget for fuel runs out, the rest of the expense falls back on District 95. So we're just encouraging you to work out a better way of budgeting that to 95.
We've already done
We've already done it. So it's already taken care of. And the last two things on here, I'm pointing out really for Anna's benefit, because we again had a lot of trouble getting that cash reconciled. And in going through, I actually did a proof of cash this year, which Tom knows that's you know, a little more in-depth audit stuff than you normally do. And a couple of things I noticed the system doing, you know, this is not Anna doing this is the computer system. And one is actually more than once, when the system voided a check, it voided the check for a different amount and it charged it to different accounts than come out of. And that would create that was a headache, okay, to figure out, and for Anna to figure out is a problem. So, you know, talk to the computer people, the software, and get that figured out. Another thing is on the outstanding checks list. As I was going through this, I noticed that checks would be on outstanding on the list, and then they'd fall off the list, and then they'd come back. Or they wouldn't be on the list, and they'd show up the next month, even though they should have been the month before. Again, it was a computer. It was a software program. It just something that was not working right, and you need to talk to them about it. That's the bulk of it. The next letter you got is some standard communications that we have with you. There's nothing unusual here. The only thing that I like to point out is that we do attach all the journal entries that we proposed and were made in performing the audit, and those are attached. That's how Anna gets her copy from us. That's the stuff we usually like to talk about. Now, the stuff in your bound report, I don't really have you follow along, but you're more than welcome to. If you turn the bound report past the table of contents, you'll come to our letterhead. And these are our audit reports, which is really what you're paying us for in an audit. These are your financial statements, even though we help you make them. But you're paying us for our opinion as to whether these financial statements are materially correct. Okay? So with that in mind, on the second page of your report, I like to go over this because your report is a little unusual. The top of the second page starts with the basis for adverse opinion on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. And this is adverse. You key in on that word, it doesn't sound good. Well, it's not good, but that's why we're going to talk about it. You know, these financial statements are presented in a format that ISBE sets up. And this format doesn't follow how financial statements are done in government anymore. They didn't update a few years ago when the rest of the world did. So we have to present it that way. So you follow that method. But since we have to issue a report as to whether you follow the correct method, we have to say, well, you didn't follow it, which is the adverse opinion on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. So adverse opinion is not what you want from an audit. Okay, so continue on down the page and we talk about a basis for qualified opinion, and I can come back to that. But the last one there is qualified opinion on regulatory basis. So this is where we say these financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects based upon ISB's method of accounting, okay? So that is a clean audit opinion on ISB's reporting line. And the reason why I say it's a qualified opinion is because ISB believes that there's some disclosures that are required that you don't have. Since you participate in IMRF, you have to let give retirees the option to continue on your health insurance at their cost. There's really no cost to the district for that, but what the accounting people have decided is that there's an inherent cost to that through the employee's service, and there's an inherent cost to all the participants of the pool, and the only person who can tell you what that cost is an actuary. And so you'd have to pay an actuary to come in and calculate that number to put it in a little footnote to the financial statement. So you don't pay an actuary to do that, so we omit that. That's what the qualification is. So it's a clean, at the end of all that, it's a clean audit, okay?
Comes around that
Yeah.
way.
And I don't like how this looks anymore, but, I want you to understand what the report says in case someone ever questions it. The next, if you turn another page or two, you'll find another piece of letterhead. This is our report. Since you receive federal funds, we have to talk about your internal controls over reporting and your compliance with laws and regulations. And on your internal controls, we do have one what we call material weakness this year that we're going to talk about. But on your compliance and with laws and regulations, there's no findings on that. So on the internal control side, I talked about those journal entries we made, or we proposed and were made. A lot of those had to do with the revenues, the transfer of money back and forth between the two districts, and the tuition and the reimbursements, and at the end of it, we end up making a lot of journal entries to get them on the right line in ISB's report, what it was. But since we have to propose those, we're not internal to the school, we're external. So we have to say there's something not working because we're having to propose those adjustments. And I guess there's already a change in that area too this year. So it should clear up some this year, but a lot of it's those revenues coming in. It does add some complexity that the school has.
We talked about, a little bit, we moved the support staff employees over to the co-op this year, which they, for retirement, for reasons that came into their retirement, we did not do for several years because it saved money for everyone. Well, we do those folks back, and they are co-op employees now, just like the teachers, so that will help a lot, just our journal entries back and forth. We were doing the book work through our office, but they were our employees, but yet we were paying through the co-op, so that should help.
Yes, it will help.
That'll help.
Like I said, that is a complication that most schools don't have to deal with. The last thing I want to talk about here, and I don't expect you to find it, but towards the end there's another piece of letterhead. Since you receive more than $500,000 of federal assistance, we have to perform what's called a single audit, which is where we have to pick certain federal programs and test them with certain things that the White House deems appropriate, and test your compliance and your controls over being compliant with those programs. So this year, like we usually do, we tested Title I and we also tested Special Ed. And all I need to tell you on that is that you will be compliant in all material respects with the programs, and that you have adequate controls in place over those programs. So no findings over those items. I believe that's all I really want to talk about. Might have been longer than 5 minutes.
Anna, you talked to a software provider about those corrections.
I will, I have, yeah. I want to go over to see.
If they can't get it corrected, maybe they'll think about switching to other software for it. Something's not working correctly.
We got more than one of that from them.
It does create tremendous problems for Ann to be able to reconcile cash in the traditional sense. She is reconciling the treasury reports and journal ledger activity, but it's more work than she really needs to do.
It's on date driven now, it's changed. I don't think they have it fine-tuned in the software, so it's previous problems in all
favorite meeting on the next meeting. You saw me, you,
Specialized data systems. They have 400 school districts and a bunch of cities.
other schools have the same.
There's some issues other places.
And would you want to switch? No, because the other part is, by the time, hopefully they get those glitches worked out, and because every time we have switched, it takes a long time then to get back into another system. So it's usually when they update something or we run into these problems that we get it squared away and then something else changes. Well, I think you just updated some things in your office as well, and it just seems like a few years, and then we get used to it, and then something else changes.
Is this a problem for the school district, or is it a problem for the employees in the school district as far as the way this is being handled? Is it just strictly an internal problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's a software problem that is creating difficulties for Ann, and at the end of each month, she can't reconcile, and she has to figure out why, what she's doing. But she shouldn't have to do it.
We're not in violation.
No, it's not an offline thing like that. It's just our suggestion to you that, hey, the thing you're paying for isn't working efficiently. No, I do not want anyone to take that Ann is doing.
No, I'm just suggesting it's, do it. It's more powerful than you.
Right. But it is, because you do have to get it down to balance, and then when it doesn't, it.
Anybody else have any questions for Brian? If not, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Any questions, please give me a call.
Thank you.
But we did end up with positive balances. We were good in all funds. You didn't really go over that, so
Okay.
we are in good shape. Don't want it out of here. Okay, they had glitches. They had, basically, after all this, we are in.
Right. And that's in that big report there.
Yeah, I know. But the newspaper is here, and so we are positive in all three funds. Positive on it.
The operating funds in aggregate are positive.
Thank you.
Thank
So I
you.
want to reinforce that. The next item, and I don't know if you leave, but the next, we'll be presenting on our ISAP reports from the buildings, and Mrs. Jones, who works with curriculum, will probably do an overview. You received information in your packet that she can go, they'll go over each school and their school improvement plans. Yeah.
So I'll begin tonight by just giving you a brief overview of the status of the district, and then the principals will be reporting on their individual school scores, ISAT scores, as well as the public central school this year. So, getting started. This is just a snapshot of our district. We no longer have the AYP report. I don't know if you recall, that was one page report that just said whether you were making that, whether you made progress. And that was always a sign of relief and reserve to see that. But now they are using the district road to determine your status comparable to AYP. We're going to call it that anymore. And if you notice there, the date says October 31st. That's when that will be made public. So this time we do not know our growth score. So we just have to wait until we know that when it becomes available. Moving on, the graduation rate, we do have that information. This is for District 95 students from high school. It's 77 to be exact, 28%. Last year it was 71%. So we are making improvement in that area, which I think is certainly good news. I'm sure Dave will report more on that at the high school board meeting. We're pleased to see that. And then information we do have at this time is the 5 Essentials survey. And overall, as a district, we received a rating of well organized, and very pleased with that because we can see that's the highest status school districts can have for the organization. And I just want to compliment our district on moving forward with the 5 Essentials survey. We were aggressive last year moving on then, and this is the last one of my slides, but this is what the essentials report looks like. And this will be on the school report card when that comes out. And you can see that the 5 areas, and the principals will report on this for individual schools, but they grade you on effective leadership, collaborative teachers, ambitious instruction, supportive environment, and involved families. And I know the shades of blue are a little bit hard to detect there, but the very deepest blue means that's the strongest rating, very strong. And so again, overall as a district, we did receive a very good rating. And I just want to maybe just highlight that last statement there. It says, in fact, schools strong on at least 3 out of 5 essentials are 10 times more likely to improve the school. And I think we're going to find school-wide we achieve that in all buildings. So, again, very pleased with the survey results from the 5 essentials. And with that overview, I'll turn it over to Jeremy. He's going to report on the status of it.
So at Mayo Middle School, we give the ISAT test, which is the Illinois Standardized Achievement Test. This is our last year administering the ISAT. The one thing that I want to say is, in my 3 years, well, this is my 3rd year being here, but it's also my 3rd year reporting on this. Every year the scores have changed. So the first year that I presented was actually on the scores before I got here. And the way that that worked is it was at a cut line of around 80%. The following year, they changed the test and changed 50% of it and also changed the cut scores, so the numbers dropped to around the 50s statewide, sort of, somewhere around that ballpark. So 50% of the test was in Common Core, or about 75%. They said different things. This year, it became 100% Common Core aligned. So every year the test has kind of changed. So we give the ISAT, we give it in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade for reading, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for math, and then the only grade level that we test science in is 7th grade. And that's just statewide the norm. So the thing you all want to know, how do we do compared to the state? So here it is. Overall, in reading, we are 2% below state average. Last year, we were 3% below state average in reading. With the test increasing with the Common Core alignment and us staying steady around that 2%, I'm actually pretty proud of that we didn't have a decrease. And so we stayed steady and we went from 3 to a 2% overall school-wide for reading. In math, last year in math when I reported, we were exactly at the state average. This year, we dropped and went to a 4% below state average. One of the reasons why I think there was that decrease is, again, 25% of the test was changed to Common Core. We didn't have all our material swapped over at that time. And so there was that decrease there. In science, you can see that we're 2% below state average, and that's one that we've hovered up and down. Are there any questions about this compared to the state average? Okay. One of the things that I wish I had for you guys tonight, because when I see these scores come, I know that it's something that I look over again and again and again and dissect with my staff, and we say, like, within math, what areas? Within reading, what areas? Because they break that up. So, like, for example, within math, you would have expressions and equations, the number system, geometry. So we want to look at specifically, what is it? And there's going to be areas where you're above the state average and below the state average, and then those are areas that we can work on for curriculum development for the following years.
I guess I was going to ask, do you expect the mathematics score to increase next year and be closer to the state average because you're teaching more of the core curriculum?
I would like to say that. However, the new testing system, this is last year of ISAT. So the new test, I don't want to make you a promise and come back and not be good on my promise. If we're going to continue with ISAT, I'd like to say yes, I hope so, but we're changing to PARCC. So the way that the testing system worked before, and I know this is, you're probably going to get really bored, But before, it was each question was aligned to like a certain area. So this question was geometry, this question was geometry, this one expressions and equations. And then we took the pool of those questions and it fed into that area, okay? Now it's no longer like that. Now it's a big performance task. So like when I'm doing reading, for example, my reading is also going to be assessing my writing. So no longer is it just informational text. It's very standard based. Now the kids are having to perform a task. So we're really doing two things within our school. We are working on not only the content and curriculum, which are the Common Core standards. Now we're also working on the performance tasking, making sure that kids can perform that task, if that makes any sense. So students have to be able to read from a text, cite from that text, and the same thing even within math. So at math, a kid is going to have to be able not only to be able to read the problem, they're going to have to explain how they got that. So one of the things we do at Mayo Middle School on a monthly basis is each one of my teachers have a professional development binder, and they love me for it. And so in that professional development binder, they actually go through it, and we have like writing samples every single month from every single class. So even PE has a writing sample every month. And then in math, they have those samples. And then what we do is I come in on the weekend and I go through all those and I say, okay, what can I do differently with my students? What can I do with my teachers? So just like my teachers are assessing their students and saying, what do I need to do differently within my class? I'm able to come in and assess what's going on in my classroom and say, what do I need to do differently? So to answer your question, I pray. I work really hard. I will tell you that we make a presentation as administrators before these scores become public. I sort of wish we didn't, because you could start looking comparatively at other schools. I was starting to look at other schools around us at our last year's ISAT scores, and I was actually pretty proud of ourselves comparatively. There's over 800 different school districts in the state of Illinois. A lot of those school districts are in the northern areas, where maybe operational or instructional spending is a lot higher, where they have a lot more access to supplementals. So we work really hard, and I'm actually pretty proud to be within that 2% or that 4%, because I'm nowhere even near to 2% or 4% in my poverty. So I'm not trying to make an excuse, but I'm saying it's pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it. Just like you're never going to get 100% A, I'll take a 98, but I want to get 101. So we're working on it.
Do they do any comparisons about schools within spending parameters? Like if we're spending $6,000 a year on a student, we're spending $20,000 a year, is there a $5,000 to $10,000 comparison versus $10,000 to $20,000 comparison?
No.
Should there be?
I think there should be. I'm not aware of any reports.
If money equals education, and sometimes I think it does, it's life profit, but it's, we're talking apples and oranges sometimes.
I think that's what Senate Bill 16 is looking at, in kind of a roundabout way, which we've talked about funding for schools. And we're talking about, is there a way to look at poverty? We're looking at some of those things and how the money that's spent in each district. They are looking at, of course, that won't solve when people live in areas that property tax is extremely high, so they're going to get quite a bit of that money from the northern areas from the taxes. But there is a bill looking at poverty and the chance for advancement in building in your area, and they're looking at redistributing funds is one thing that we have been looking at. We would end up being a winner in that bill, because it does take into account how much money schools are sent from the general state aid, and the schools that have the highest poverty or the least chance of expanding business in their area or those types of things. So that's kind of one way they might be saying, hey, there's probably is a difference here, but
And I've tried looking at school districts who have similar poverty rates to ourselves within our common area and kind of comparing scores. And Danville, Northridge actually has a very similar poverty rate to us. They're in the 30s, so that kind of gives you an idea. Westville is similar to us in poverty. They're in the 30s. And so is Georgetown Mary Miller Junior High, and they're about 38. So that kind of gives you an idea. Overall state average, you have it broken out in your packet, sixth grade through 8th grade, and you can see the 7th grade science on there. The one thing that I do want to say is that you see the gap, at least this trend this year, where it actually started to close from 6th grade to 8th grade, where my 8th graders were above state average. So you can see that it starts to decrease the gap. Demographics within my building, I had 268 ISAT test takers. That does not mean I had 268 students in my building, I had more than that. There are other students who take a different test called the IAA, which is the Illinois Alternative Assessment. That's actually changing also this year. It's going to dynamic learning maps. As far as ISAT takers, you can see 6th grade 109, 7th grade 76, 8th grade 90. And that 7th grade class is a smaller class, but there's also IAA students you have to add on. One of the things that I thought was interesting that you might not is that for the first time since I presented, I actually have more males than females. So I just thought that's kind of interesting. 40 special ed students took this test, okay? And out of those 268, 171 of those students were free and reduced. We also have the 5 Essentials report. If you remember, we had the 5 Essentials dinner in the spring of last year. This report always makes me nervous, and I'm going to be honest with you, because my teachers are assessing me, my students are assessing my teachers, I'm going to say, and my parents are assessing the overall school. And so it's kind of interesting to see how this came out. This is something that I'm pretty proud of. You can see here is Illinois state average and similar schools. There's Mayo Middle School. And you can see on here, you actually have 2 different shades of blue going on. So these 3 are my darkest blue, and these 2 are just strong. So what this says is that within these 3 areas, effective leaders, which are my teachers who assess me, and they have opinions, collaborative teachers, so they actually are talking about each other, and ambitious curriculum, which are my students assessing my teachers. We came off very strong, which is the highest. So I was pretty proud of that. Within our involved families and supportive environment, we scored strong, which is, it says strong, it's above neutral. This is one of the things that we continue to work on at Mayo Middle School. I'm of the belief that as you get older through the grade levels, parents have a little bit less involvement within the schools. So when you're in, let's say, early childhood, the parents tend to be wanting to be more of a ring parent. As you get older, they start to back off a little bit. And I understand that because we want that independence, but we try bringing them in. So that's why we have things like trivia nights, murder mystery nights. We have Grandparents' Day. We had over 150 grandparents up for Grandparents' Day this year. It was fantastic. The last 2 years we've had about 30. So, we didn't have enough seats. Steve, you were there.
Yeah.
We didn't even have enough seats. It was really something. That's why we're going to have donkey basketball, not just to raise money, but I love having events within my school so the community can come in. The murder mystery night, I talked to Dan Lynch about that, and I said, we're not even looking to make money off of this. I just want people in my building. So people like Mayo Middle School want to be here. And so it actually goes to support their theater programs. But I just want people in my building having fun. And so we're working on these involved families, and hopefully next year I'm going to be reporting they are very strong. So the next one is Mrs. Perry.
Okay, just like at Mayo, we test reading 3rd, 4th, 5th, math 3rd, 4th, 5th, and science is in 4th grade. And like he says, last year for ISAT, and next year we'll be working on the park. Scores for WINS. Reading, WINS scored about a percentage over the state average, which I was really proud of. This is a school overall. Math, a percent over, and science, we did really well, about 11% over the state average. So when we look at our state averages for each grade level, we see 3rd grade reading, we were a little bit below the state average. This is an area that we have really been working on in the school and analyzing some of those areas the kids had trouble with. One of the areas we identified was vocabulary, that the kids really had a hard time on the test with the vocabulary. So we have put in some other programs to give kids more exposure to different kind of vocabulary. One of them I remember was like shallow, that the kids had trouble with defining what that was. I think as they're exposed to more, well, then they'll remember those a little bit better for the test. Fourth grade reading, and then it shows as they have more exposure to the program, why then the scores go up. Also, third grade math was lower than the state, and it's one of those, the kids are struggling when they go from the addition, subtraction to some of the harder things that we're asking them to do with multiplication and with explaining how they got their answer was very difficult for the third graders last year. That was something new that they hadn't had to do as much with. And last year's test, of course, was the Common Core, and they were required to do more explanation of how they got their answer. Our fourth and fifth grade did, as you can see, did very well. I'm really proud of our teachers. They worked really hard on getting these kids ready for the test and made sure that they knew the content that they needed to know. And our science, and historically, we do very well in science in fourth grade, and that continues to show on last year's test. Any questions so far? Okay, our demographics, we had 276 students take the test. This, like Jeremy said, does not include the 51 students that took the alternate assessment. Or no, we had 51 that took the ISAT. We did have fewer kids taking the alternate assessment. We're adding kids on IEPs that take the ISAT test. So unless they have a very significant disability, they're required to take the regular test as the children without disabilities. The park is going to be the same way. We do have the option to let them have different accommodations on the test, and that's determined by their IEP. Last year, we had 194 that were on free and reduced lunch. I went and looked this year. Currently, we have about 290 students. It's about that. We got 2 more today. So each week we're getting a couple more, so our enrollment is going up. And we have about 200 students are on free and reduced lunch. We have gotten a few more IEP students, but none that will not be able to take the test. So those students will be on next year's test too. Our 5 essentials report, just like Jeremy was showing the top or 2, the effective leaders are the teachers evaluating me, collaborative teachers, they're evaluating each other, and involved families, the teachers responding on how easily it is to get the parents to come in and be involved. The other 2 areas, ambitious instruction and supportive environment, are ones that come from student responses. And in K through 5, students don't take this survey. So we couldn't get a score on those 2. So I was really pleased with this. I know our teachers at Wentz work really hard. They spend a lot of time in grade level meetings, making sure that they're working with each other, they're collaborating on their plans, on their curriculum, you know, to do the best for their kids. Here we have memorial.
I'm probably the one who can grade the easiest because I don't have scores to show you. Because at this point, and I'm not going to argue, we aren't tested. However, I can't imagine that that's going to remain that way forever. But even though we're not tested in my building, we are still working very hard from the time they get to us in kindergarten to help prepare them for what they're going to do in 3rd grade. And so that's why you see when we make curriculum shifts, we're making that shift K-8 versus just at third grade up, because we know that they need to start as soon as they get in school. So here are my numbers. We had 319 students last year. This year, Mrs. Perry talked about per enrollment. As of the last time I looked at our enrollment population, we are at 343, including preschool. My largest grade level this year is first grade. You can see last year as kindergarten, we ended with 107. Currently, I have 117 students in first grade. So we not only maintained, we are growing in first grade. So we're growing at Memorial, and that's a very positive thing. I hope we continue to do that. Although we're running out of desks and all of that, which again, is a good problem to have. I'd rather have too many than not enough. And then you can see my males and females in my free and reduced lunch. That's a big deal at our school with the free and reduced. We have a lot of students who are in need of that assistance there. Just because we're not tested, though, again, I mentioned, doesn't mean that we are not working toward it. I mean, we are very, very aware of what's expected, and so we are working to progress to help our students. I came in on, if an administrator has a platform, it was all kindergarten, first and second grade students need to leave second grade at reading level, at their grade level. And so we spend a lot of time working on that. It is my philosophy that if they can't read, then they can't do anything else. And so we spend a lot of time with math, but we are also going to spend a lot of time helping students get to grade level. And so next year, we are incorporating into our day a 30-minute intervention time that we are going to spend 30 minutes per class grade level, focusing on the skills where they're deficit in reading. And we are using our Ames Web data to help us build those groups. We are working on a diagnostic test of rhyming, of phonemic segmentation, all of that to help us get a snapshot of where our students are, so that then we can break them up into groups and say, okay, this group needs this skill, we're going to work on this skill until we have the data to show they're ready to move on. Because if they can't read, then they're not going to be able to read that story problem in math, which is what they're being asked to do. And we're seeing that with our new math series now, is that, okay, we are asking kids to read a story problem, but they don't have the basics to read that story problem. And so that's a problem. And that's where we need to focus and work on so that we can get them where they need to be. Wentz has started working on typing, because we know that as soon as third grade, if they're going to be asked to take that PARCC test online, they need to have those typing skills. So we're looking at what that looks like in our building, their kindergarten, first and second graders. And a lot of the time it's, I can't believe we're asking kindergarten students to start manipulating a keyboard, but they have to. We have to start building on these skills so that when they get to Wentz and they get to that test in third grade, they have had exposure to it. Now, I'm not ready to say we are going to implement a typing curriculum building-wide kindergarten, but we need to start. We need to start introducing that. We need to start giving them those skills so that they can be prepared to take that test. And so those are the things we're doing. We are constantly working in grade level collaborations. I've asked my grade levels to meet 2 times per month this year. Last year it was, let's start, try to meet monthly. This time I wanted to meet 2 times. Formally, the grade levels are meeting informally every day. I can walk down the hall and see my grade levels working together. But formally, I'm asking them to sit down, give me minutes of those meetings so I can see what I need to do, what they need, what they've discussed. And as I'm sure you can guess, math has been a highlight. Reading is a highlight as well, just because those are areas of where we need to work together. So those are the things that we are doing to help get our students ready, because the scores that especially Mrs. Perry showed at Wentz, those are honors. And I try to implement, I try to highlight that to my second grade team, my first grade, and kindergarten. Just because we're not giving it in our building doesn't mean that we aren't responsible, and we shouldn't be held accountable to what those third grade students are doing once they leave us, because they've spent the first 2 years, the first 3 years with us. those scores really are ours. And then here's our 5 essential report, and honestly, I'm very pleased with my scores. You know, I walked into a building last year as a new leader, and you know, I should have been the one who was most nervous with these scores, with new principal. This is really an assessment of me in my first year, and so I'm happy. You know, my teachers are saying that effective leadership is strong. They're neutral in themselves, but you know what? They're learning. Last year was kind of a, how do we collaborate? What does it mean? What does it look like? This is what we need to do. So they're neutral there. I'd like to see that grow. And our involved families. I had a teacher come to me last year. Well, it was almost toward the end of the family being able to take the assessment and said, hey, I have this idea. And it was a Tootsie Roll on a card that said, you know, give us your feedback and we'll feed you. I don't know what the verbiage was on the card, but we see most of our students and their families every day at dismissal. My teachers walk out with their classes. We put the kids in the cars. So this spring when we do this again, I want to give everybody a postcard. I said, here, you know, here's a piece of candy. Take our survey, give us some feedback. Hopefully, then we can get this involved families up, and we can get the percentage that we need to really give us some good information. And as Mrs. Perry said, the supportive environment and ambitious instruction, we don't have so that's what we're doing at Memorial to make sure that once the students get to Wentz, they are as prepared as they can be to be successful. Any questions?
If the kids can't read at a second grade level, how do you determine that? Is there an internal test that you administer to tell you the feedback?
We use our Ames Web, which at each grade level in kindergarten, it's can they recognize their letters? Can they hear the letter sounds?
So do they get a grade level?
Yes, they get a
grade, so to speak. Like
yes.
If they're in the second grade, they should be reading at the second grade level. Do they get like a 1 or a 2 or a 6? Or?
When they get to first grade, then they take the STAR reading test, and that gives them their grade level equivalent. So you could be, you know, as a first grader, let's say you could be at a 0.5, or you could be in the third grade reading level. You could be reading the fourth grade reading level. So yeah, we can get all of that information. Now we don't have that at kindergarten, but at kindergarten at that point we aren't really looking at reading as it's more of sounding out words, learning words, versus once we get them up. So yes, we do have that information. And the question not only is, how do we help the students who are struggling, because that's sometimes an easier solution. The question is, what do I do with this group of kids who are, you know, reading the third, fourth, fifth grade level? What do we do to help those students do? Because we don't want to hold them back, but we also need to get this group moved up. So we can get.
What happens if they're not at that level? Do they get sent on anyway? So you had a second grader that was reading at the first grade level. Do they go to third grade?
No. I mean, based
I mean,
on.
That's a fair question.
It is.
And it seems to me like those are the people that maybe ought not to be sent on, or ought to be helped in the summer, or do something to isolate that group and prepare them a little bit further.
And that's what we are hoping to accomplish with our 30 minutes every day of intervention time, is to help those students who are way below reading level to move up, to get them as close to second grade, 9th month when they leave our building.
So you're using 30 minutes a day per student?
That's over and above the reading time.
Yeah, that's
This is an intervention.
And who does this over this 30 extra minutes?
everybody in the grade level in my
And the
title
teachers that
staff.
are teaching that grade level?
Yes.
So if they take an extra half an hour for reading, then they've got to take half an hour out of something else?
We are taking that time out of, we are using that time the way we do our title groups right now. So during that 30 minutes, I have, let's take second grade for example. I have 5 homeroom teachers in second grade, and I have 4 title staff. So at that point, I have 9 of my staff members who are working on the different skills that we find when we test them. So maybe it's reading comprehension, maybe it's fluency, how fast can they read and what do they understand as they're reading. And it may go down to, do they know their letter sounds? Do they know their letter names? Do they know how to write? Can they do these things? That will be enriching their reading and that grade level. So yeah, I mean, we are taking 30 minutes out of our day to do
It's gotta
this.
come from someplace else.
It does, but it's important. They need this enrichment, they need this,
I don't disagree.
this intervention. So yes, I mean,
I'm just questioning where the time's coming from.
and it may take out some of that time that maybe we could focus on a social studies, piece of nonfiction or a science piece of nonfiction, but it helps those kids prepare to read. I mean, we are still looking at our schedule and we're saying, okay, reading, math, do we have time for those? Yes. Do we have time to get our specials in? Yes. Here's this 30 minutes now that we can take some of these skills groups and focus them into this time so that when we do get back into the classroom,
Will you actually take them out of the classroom?
well, they're going to be moving, yes. They're going to be fluid groups. That 30 minutes, I've got everybody in a grade level working on these skills. So we're going to have kids all around in second grade working with my second grade teachers, with my title staff, to be focusing on the areas where we see deficiencies. So yes, at this point, we're going to have kids scattered all over working on areas.
Not necessarily in the same classroom as they still are.
We're going to put groups with groups, kids with kids who need the most help. And then once we have data to support that they have this skill, we move them on to the next area where they have a deficiency.
Which is also what we've done for years in our Title I program, because also we concentrated mainly on reading, and we have how many paraprofessionals in your building for the Title I, 3, 4. They also, I mean, reading is, of course, a huge priority, and we always have kids on at level, but we're always working interventions and attempting to increase the reading level. So we have Title I services, we have our RTI services, we have, now you're going to implement another portion of the day just to, and you'll isolate skills that students are deficient and then bring some of those students together in smaller groups and, like you said, out of the classroom they may be in.
And then do we still evaluate them at the end of the year and decide if they can do the work at that particular level?
We evaluate constantly.
And there'll always
It's
be
not-
students moving on that aren't exactly at grade level, some are way above grade level, there's
I'm
always.
not worried about the ones that go above.
Well, I know, but we are there
And that's
just like
what-
we said, because we wanted to give advanced
Right,
work as well.
right, and that's the question
Yeah,
too, is
that was my one of my other concerns. We have a teacher that's got to spend 30 minutes with this group, but once the accelerates, well, they get the focus here, it's not.
But those students who are ready for the enrichment aren't going to be, they aren't going to be held up working on a deficiency. They're going to be over here, and that's what we're trying to identify right now is what can you not get to, or what can you not get to well. And so we're talking about, okay, maybe these students can be writing, maybe they can be working on chapter books, maybe they can be working on, something that's going to challenge them at their level, because again, I don't want to hit a middle.
It's kind of like the 80-20, when they spend 80% of the money on 20% of the family. And that's just typical of the industry, typical of education. I'm just worried about that.
And we are too. And I don't want that 20% not to have something that's going to continue to challenge, because they need to be challenged. And everybody does, at their level. And that's what we want to do at this time. And we want to make sure that these groups are always fluid, so that nobody is stuck. Once they test out, they're on to the next skill, because we know that they've got this skill. And that doesn't mean we don't go back and test. Let's say rhyming, for example. We're doing rhyming right now in kindergarten. And if they test out rhyming, wonderful. But that doesn't mean we say, okay, Mr. Riley, you're good, you know how to rhyme, and so we know that you're gonna rhyme forever. No, we're gonna come back and test you and say, okay, do you still know what you're doing? And if you do, wonderful, and if you don't, you need to say, yes. So that's what we're doing, and the question has come up, if we're spending all this time in 30 minutes, can we throw some, will we have time for math intervention? Yes, I want to, because once we get reading, once we know that what we're doing for our students in reading is working, then we can use our title staff differently throughout the day. Right now, my title staff is maxed. They are working with small groups every 10, 15 minutes every day. They aren't taking the prep time, they're working with kids, which means they're busy, they're constantly cycling out kids, which means, I had a first grade teacher come to me the other day and said, how do I teach a math lesson? Look at this, how do I teach a math lesson? And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, just look. Look at the title schedule, look at my time. How do I do this? And what she meant was, she constantly had kids being pulled out of her room in the allotted time that she was going to teach math. She said, how do I teach a whole group math lesson when my kids are constantly being pulled out? That is what I'm hoping the 30 minutes will solve, is that I don't have teachers who are constantly having students pulled out of their room, because it becomes an issue then. They can never teach a whole class because it's coming in down. And that's a problem. And I'd like to really look at that and say, how can we eliminate some of that? We never will eliminate all of it, but how can we eliminate some of that interruption so that those kids can be in seats when they need to be for whole group instruction?
Well, it seems to me like people and kids all learn at a different speed, different level. And I know this is not perfectly correct, but can you combine the ones that need more instruction and provide that for them, and the ones that don't need so much to get less attention in terms of teacher per student time? And would that be more efficient than pulling everybody out? Is that what
Yes.
You probably can't do that, I'm sorry.
And we do, I mean, right now we differentiate within our rooms, and sometimes it's good for all involved to be together, because then the 20% can help the 80%, and that's not fair to do all the time. But the best way to learn a skill is to teach it. The best way to make sure you have it is to help somebody else. You know, I found in my own, the very first year I taught, a lot. But the more I taught it, the more I got to know it, the better I was, because I had to do it. And so these kids are the same way. I mean, the push now is not to have them be in their seats, it's get up and do it. You know, it's more performance, as Mr. Larson was talking about. Well, the more they perform it, the more they're going to, you have to. When you're standing up in front of a group teaching something, then you have to know what to do. So that's not going to stop either. It's just a matter of making sure that we can intensify that instruction on some of these skills.
Well, this is just my personal opinion. But as long as we expect our students to be 100% educated at school, you know, we'll get that. So that's just a fact. I'm not belittling your efforts or anything else, but they've got to ask for help in other organizations. And I think your involved families are supporting them. I think that's all probably as important as anything you've got over here.
Well, in some cases, it's even more important for the student to know that the parent and the school are on the same page. Because if the child knows that the parent and the school aren't, then sometimes that's where the issue. So you're right. So that's why we do things. Tomorrow night we're doing a family fun night at Memorial. And that's why we do these things, to get the parents and the students in, to show them that we're all working together toward the same goal, and that is helping prepare the student to be successful in life. It's not about, in some regards, it's not about a curriculum, it's not about a grade, it's about we are helping them be successful in their lives. And it starts as early as kindergarten. And I think that's hard sometimes for parents to see, is kindergarten is supposed to be socialization. It's not supposed to be about curriculum and grades, but it is, because it has to. We have to start that early and make sure that we're ready for what the world's going to be. Me too.
I just have to talk.
come to the next part of the presentation, which is the school district and school improvement plan. And these are the 6 areas that we're going to highlight this year. I'm going to talk about the first 3, and Jeremy's going to do the last 3 topics up there. And you might be asking, well, why does Jeremy do the last 3 topics? Well, he probably didn't give the last 3 topics. I better do that since he's such a great one. So anyway, on our writing curriculum, this is an area we have hit hard and we will continue to do so. It's an area we probably just work on every year, I imagine. We do have consistent writing expectations, and that really is thanks to the top 4. We have anchor standards that apply all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade. So for example, all students, to some degree, now keep in mind teachers adapt as needed according to the age group, but all students are expected to be able to do the opinion piece, the informative piece, narrative piece, and then a research piece. Now, of course, what it looks like in kindergarten, what it looks like in 6th grade are kind of different, but yet those are the common expectations of the grade levels. Common vocabulary, we've been working on this, where we want to use all the same kind of writing terms throughout the grade levels. We had a writing presenter come this summer, and we have paid review teachers there who worked on this. Skip that common vocabulary, and give you an example. In narrative, one of the expectations is that students should be able to quote a character to delve into the characters, how they're thinking, and so, for example, dialogue comes in. That's the term we use now instead of saying, well, kind of quote. So we say we need to develop dialogue within the narrative piece. So that just gives you an example of the things that we try to get accomplished over the summer. Constructive writing, what that means is that students will read a informative text, piece of text, and then prompt will follow, and they respond to the prompt or question by citing evidence from the text, answering the question properly, and having an introduction and a conclusion. That is being heavily taught at the 2nd grade starts the process out, and then 3rd grade continues it. And we are using, we'll get to the rubrics there, which is the last one though, but I just want to point out there, we have worked together on that, Nancy and Mayo have, we've got a common rubric that sets out the expectations for the students in that grade level, so getting that consistent development among grades. Pacing guides, what that means is we can now determine, how many narratives or informative pieces will the students do at each grade level. So we've got that set. And then, as I mentioned before on the rubrics, each school has now common rubrics that we're using to grade their writing pieces. And they are aligned, of course, to the PARCC expectations. And I just want to point out one thing too, that you might say, well, you're doing all this to get prepared for PARCC. Well, yes, we are, but PARCC reflects the Common Core standards. For example, when Gary mentioned about having the typing right in the Common Core standards under writing, it will say students are expected to write a 1-page paper, grade 4. So the reason PARCC is expecting it is right here in PARCC. Reading, vocabulary, we know is an area we need to continue to hit hard, and I would like to meet with teachers this year and delve into that vocabulary more. What can we do to be able to help our students be able to figure out the meaning of words in the context? We're working on that. We do have 50% of our reading selections now are nonfiction. That's across kindergarten through 8th grade. Close readings, that means where the students read a more difficult piece of text, and they may take 1, 2, 3 readings to understand it, and the teacher leads them through that process. Again, because the Common Core expectations, along with PARCC, expect students to be able to analyze more difficult pieces of text. You might wonder why this is important, but according to studies, that Elementary, of course, we're all reading science, social studies teachers, so it's, easy for them to do because they have their same students and they apply the same reading strategies. At Mayo, that's a little bit more difficult because students travel from teacher to teacher. But I know Jeremy and the Mayo teachers have worked very hard on using reading and writing strategies, not only, of course, in the language arts classrooms, but in science and social studies and technology too. So we're really working hard on that. And to get across the fact that, it's just not one teacher's ballgame, it's all teachers' ballgame to be able to get our students to be successful. Our reading assessments, that's one thing I like to work with teachers on too, is getting our reading assessments, they need to be a little more challenging, I feel, getting better aligned with our Common Core standards, part, and testing them like they're going to be testing other part of them. So we need to look at those closely. And then my last slide is the math. And of course, we have switched our math curriculum from Saxon to Rock Hill, which is Glencoe at the middle school and I have at the elementary. We still have prepared teachers well for that. They've had several summer hours devoted to looking into the new curriculum, getting materials ready. We've had teachers from that too come to work with our teachers over the summer as well. I've met already with the first and second grade teachers after they spent with them on this, and we're continuing to do more of that throughout the year. We have had planned parent meetings to go over the online part of the curriculum as well as answer any questions you might have. Winston's already have theirs, they don't have theirs a few nights ago, and Memorial will have theirs tomorrow night as part of the family department. They have a room devoted, half-hour slots, in case parents would like to attend that.
How well were those attended?
Well, at Wentz, I think there were about 6 parents. At Mayo, 2. So yes, we were disappointed that we didn't have more parents like that.
Do you know why there weren't more, or?
We sent out notices, I believe even text alerts.
I believe it just, when we get quick questions, we filter through them, and I always say that parents either call, email, or stop in. And I think that, for the most part, unless you feel like there's a situation, most parents just don't come to parent informational meeting. That's something that we've tried to encourage. We had district-wide, I always tell the story, we had a district-wide parent informational meeting once where we offered to go through your kid's entire record with you. Every test score, explain it, we'll have all copies made, please come. I had one parent show up, district-wide. And I know I would have been there saying, show me what you got. I want to know. And we just don't have very much, not unless there's an issue. When there's an issue, they will come find me.
Can you infer from that there's not a problem with the mathematics Common Core situation? Or the parents not saying anything and not getting a response?
What I would infer from my building is that I don't have any parent discontent or concerns yet. And I don't anticipate them, and if I do, I will deal with them effectively. So, I had one parent contact me so far this year. The parent contacted me and said it was one of the hardest math problems that I've ever done. And I said to that parent, did it have a little flame next to the number? And the parent said, by golly, it did. And I said, well, it's called a hot problem. And those problems have a little flame because they are really hard. And I said, and those problems are meant to be hard. They're meant to challenge the kids. And I always explain it to a parent. If I go to the gym and I walk out and I'm not sweating, then I probably didn't work hard enough. And if my kids don't walk out of class some days struggling and tired and feeling weary, sometimes I wonder if I'm pushing them hard enough. So it's important to have those hot problems every once in a while. So that was the only question I have received all year in regards to math as far as a frustration. Personally, myself at Mayo.
I just want to say too, whenever you switch math curriculums, it's rough at first, and this year especially. It's a growing year. I really think this year will be the toughest. This first year will be the toughest, and I think we'll get of the expectations, you know, we're assuming kids have had some material, start a new series, then start somewhere. So, you know, it makes it a little rough because the teachers have to go back and reteach some things or even teach some things they hadn't had the year before because of the new series.
Especially if they're not already at that level.
Right. So we just have to be patient with it and be positive, and we'll get through this year. The last item there on constructive response, that again, Jeremy already alluded to that. That's where the students write about how they solved the problem and explain why they did what they did. And those are built right into the new math program. So that's good. We don't have to go out and try to find these materials. They're there. They're part of the curriculum. So we feel, we hope to do better on those constructive response in math, because typically we have done very well in those in the past. So are there any questions on this portion of the school improvement? Okay, I'll turn it over to Jeremy for the last slide.
I promise I will be quick. So, the three areas that I want to present on, and the first one is science. They're actually, just like Common Core came out for language arts and for math, they also came out with the new generation science standards. They don't get a lot of attention now. What you need to know about the new generation science standards is that they will not be assessed under PARCC. So Mrs. Perry stood up here tonight, and I stood up here tonight and told you 7th grade and 3rd grade, 4th grade, I apologize. 7th grade and 4th grade were both tested in science. Next year when you see our score reports, you will not see anything in science. However, they came out with these new standards and they said, these are what your students are supposed to learn. We're just not going to hold you accountable. So we still want to make sure that we're teaching these. We still want to make sure that our students are ready, because I always tell my teachers, you never know when that test is going to come back. So we worked really hard to make sure that we are measuring up to these standards. One interesting thing with my prediction, and I just emailed this out to my teachers, I think this weekend, is I'm subscribed to the state board's listserv, so every time they get an update I get it and read through. And they actually are planning on assessing science in the upcoming years. I don't expect that you'll see it in the next 2 years, but I do think that eventually you will see it come back around. So it's important that we're always giving quality to everything and not forgetting it. So under these new generation science standards, what you need to know, it's just like we said, ISAT was very, how I want to say this, very like individualized, like one skill at a time, and PARCC is more performance task, where I have to show. You're going to see a lot of these different areas where research is more of that performance task. Problem analysis, I'm analyzing a problem. The writing, I'm explaining how I got there. The engineering, which is that critical piece. And then the technology integration, which is just in everything anymore. So again, you can see that with the new science standards, it is very performance-based. So we are making sure that we are integrating these standards into our science rooms. As far as technology readiness goes, what you need to know is that starting early on, you know, it used to be that we wanted our students to be able to communicate verbally. We wanted them to communicate through writing, but we also have to make sure that kids have the ability to communicate through typing. And so we do have that keyboarding piece district-wide that we're looking at. Also just making sure that every classroom has access to that technology and they can integrate it into their classroom. One of the things that I often say is that if I'm a teacher, my job is to teach not math, my job is not necessarily to teach computers. I want to make sure that I can push my kids as far as I can in math, and if I can integrate technology in, that's great. But if I integrate technology in and it slows me down on my math lesson, then it probably isn't wise. So it's making sure that we use technology where it's effective, and making sure that if we can't use it, well then we stick to our same measures. We also are looking district-wide at our computer-to-student ratio, just making sure that students in all buildings have access to those computers. And we're also looking to that first year of testing, because before, our students would take the test on paper. This year they're going to take it on a computer. So that's another thing when Amy says to me, Jeremy, now that you guys have started to change some of your curriculum, are your scores going up? I just say there's so many factors. Because there's that performance, and I hate to make excuses. I do, I promise you, I work as hard as I can. But there's so many factors. There's that performance-based piece to it. Your curriculum's changing. It's a way of thinking for your students. And also, the access to technology, that's one thing I worry about. I was a computer teacher. You have kids who are at home on those computers and they know them like nobody's business. But I promise you that in my middle school, I have kids who don't have access to computers at home, and they get on that computer the first time in Mr. Sanders' 7th grade science class, and they think it's a big deal they can change the font color, you know? And so it's just different. And so there's so many different variables. This is our last slide. So we are almost done. Park. Park is new test. So it was ISAT, so now it's Park. So how do we make sure we're Park ready? Now, you might just say that we're teaching to the test. However, there's more than just being Park ready by getting kids ready for the test. It's getting our buildings ready for the test because we have to use computers. So we have to look at our Park testing schedules. And this might not seem like a big deal. This is a huge deal. A lot of what we're working on, every day. So for example, the kids used to take the test once in March. Now they're going to take it in March and May. So now there's 2 times the kids are getting tested. It used to be that the testing window was 2 weeks. Now it's 4 weeks each time. That's 2 months of testing window. So my teachers used to say, you're taking 2 weeks of my instruction. Now you can take 2 months of their instruction. So we are saying, as a school, how do we not take up instructional time just for testing? How do we balance that? So we started looking at that this summer because we like to be ahead of the curve. We also looked at Park tools. There are specific tools within this test, like the drag and drop, the highlight, the magnifier. They have different rulers, like teaching our students there's a difference between the 1/4-inch ruler and the centimeter ruler, and making sure they can identify that on the computer. Might not seem like a big deal, but it is. And so just making sure our students have access to those tools, they're seeing them often. Also, we want to make sure our students have access to take practice tests, just because we want them to see what it feels like to be on that computer. We also have to train our teachers for that proctor training, because before, usually papers didn't mess up too much. Okay, you take a paper, worst thing you can do is maybe spill it or rip it. Okay, spill something on it or rip it. Now you have a computer. What about when my computer automatically just shuts off? I kick the cord. Or was that automatic restart or updates? How do you handle that? So, Mrs. Perry, Carol, myself, and Nathan Bell, we actually had the opportunity to practice the park last year, administer a field test. And we sat there every day with our notebooks, making sure we documented every single error and started saying, okay, how are we going to troubleshoot these when it actually comes? And how are we going to train our teachers? And we actually have trainings that are going to come up training our teachers. And then just making sure our computer labs are park ready. So how do we make sure these computers and all our other computer labs are ready for the kids to take the test? Because there are certain requirements that your computer has to meet. So we want to make sure of that. Just like one interesting fact is that when it pops up, you can't go on anything below. Because when you're taking the test, they don't want you going on Internet Explorer looking something up. Okay? So it takes up the entire screen. Well, the thing is when it takes up the entire screen, you literally cannot see anything behind it. So it took us several times to finally figure out what was going on, because we'd see kids' computers just shutting down. We didn't see the power going off. We knew these were good quality computers. We just weren't sure what was going on. Well, our computers had it where it would say, your computer has updates that need to be updated. Click postpone, or this is going to be updated in the next 10 minutes. You guys might have seen that on your computers, okay? And usually you'll click postpone, or you'll say just restart now. Well, the kids couldn't see that. So the 10 minutes would go by, the computer would shut down, and then there goes my test. So that's another thing that makes us really nervous is frustration levels. If I have a kid who has to take that test 3 times, they're going to hit a frustration level. The 3rd time they take that test, guarantee they're not going to get it the quality they did the 1st time. They're ticked, okay? And I get it. And so we're trying to make sure that we keep those frustration levels down as much as possible. This ends our presentation. Thank you for your patience.
Sounds like we need to get Nathan in there and some people to make sure those updates don't come on.
Do we have enough computers, Jeremy?
What?
Do we have enough computers for our students?
You know, Yes,
no,
he set you up for that.
if you you ask me, I think that we have a good start this year. We have a good start this year. However, you can always have more. My thing is if my kids are going to be tested in math or tested in reading on the computer, should my reading teacher or my math teacher not have regular access to computer labs? If my kids are going to be asked to type a paper, I'd like them to have that access. But there's so many other needs within my school, just like we talked about with Gary, having those support people who can work with those kids who are struggling or need the enrichment. There's always a million needs. I was a computer teacher, so that's kind of a loaded question.
Everybody needs three.
Right now, I would ask that the board, and I thank everyone for the presentations, and I thank you for your, this is not really how our board meetings are always go. We just happen to have 2 long presentations this evening as well. But the school improvement plan itself does need to be approved by the board, and the Title I indicators. Now, as Jeremy would want to point out, you're approving their school improvement plan, but it is an ongoing plan. There is no cut plate plan that you're saying this is what we're doing. They will add to, and what they're saying is they use their test data, they analyze their test data, they work from that to plan how they want to improve in those areas. And that's what each building is doing, and the staff's working on together, and what we talked about in our APT meeting tonight. We have a communications meeting, how we're going to get teachers, and specifically primary teachers of this Common Core math, and they're still struggling with this as a first year to come to this, and there's some gaps in it, so we're going to start planning some teacher workshops and things more during the day to do. So I am going to ask right now that you do approve the district school improvement plan and Title I indicators, but keeping that in mind.
You're talking about the school improvement concept.
Yes, right. There you go.
Rather than a plan.
But if I can have a
Plan is dynamic rather than static.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, Idle,
Yes.
Ister,
Yes.
Tuttle, not here, I'm sorry, Bailey?
Yes.
Davis is yes.
That's all of the superintendent's doing.
Okay. Do we have any committee reports this evening? Public hearings and petitions, unfinished business, matters for follow-up, new business, right to revert to prior order of business. Do we have a motion for adjournment? Do we have a second? Idle,
Yes.
Isaac, Bailey, Davis is yes. The meeting is adjourned.